Started recording. Okay. Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. We are going through Bhagavad Gita and we are on chapter 18. We're going to start with verses 33 to 35. The format is we'll have two readings in English and then Yogeshwar will be talking about these verses. Please keep track of all the questions that you have. Feel free to ask your questions once Yogeshwar is done. And then we'll go to the next series of verses. So we'll start with verses 33 to 35. David, if you could go ahead and read.
Certainly. So chapter 18, 33 to 35 from the Bhagavad Gita translation. I had a preview last night when I went a little too far. O Arjuna, the uninterrupted determination which motivates the activities of the mind, the life breath, and the senses by the science of uniting the individual consciousness with the ultimate consciousness is determination in the nature of goodness. But the determination by which righteousness, sensual desire, and wealth are motivated by attachment to the fruit of desires, O Arjuna, is in the nature of passion. That determination, O Arjuna, by which the unintelligent is unable to abandon dreaming, fearing, grieving, depression, and foolhardiness is in the nature of nescience.
Thank you, David. So I'm going to read from the Aurobindo translation. That unwavering persistence by which, through yoga, one controls the mind, the senses, and the life, that persistence, O Partha, is sattvic. But that, O Arjuna, by which one holds fast, right, and justice, dharma, interest, artha, and pleasure, kama, and which great attachment, desires for the fruits, that persistence, O Partha, is rajasic. That by which one from ignorance does not abandon sleep, fear, grief, depression, and also pride, that persistence is tamasic. Am I reading the right one, Yogeshwar?
Yes, that's the right one.
Okay, go ahead, Yogeshwar.
Okay. Dhrityaya dharayate manah pranendriya kriyaah yogena vyabhicharinya dhrite sa partha satviki yaya tu dharma kamarthan dhritya dharayate arjuna prasangena palakankshi dhrite sa partha rajasi yaya swapnam bhayam shokam vishadam madhamevacha na vimunchati durmedha dhriti sa partha tamasi. As we discussed yesterday, Krishna has now moved on to the last three perspectives, where he will give the three categories of Sattva, Raj, and Tama. These three categories are more into the being. We started with Yajna, Dan, and Tapaha in chapter 17. Those have an internal perspective, but they surely are more towards the outside, more towards karma, more towards interaction with the environment. Slowly by slowly, using tyaga, using karma, using dhyana, Krishna has now come to the last three: buddhi, dhriti, and sukham. We talked about buddhi yesterday. All these three perspectives are more towards the internal, more towards the core of your being. Because when you want to make someone understand the perspectives of these three qualities, start with where he will understand. Start with where he stands. If somebody stands at the peripheral and you talk about the core, there will be no understanding. Krishna started with the peripheral, where Krishna knows about dana, and Arjuna as well knows about dana. Arjuna also knows about the yajnas that are being done. If you put that into category, then slowly by slowly, Arjuna can also understand what Krishna wants to bring him towards. The tamasic type of person, what type of dhriti does he have? Now, dhriti has two definitions, even in Sanskrit. In Amar Kosha, dhriti is dharana, dhriti, dharana, dhairya yoho. That's part of Amar Kosha. Dhriti means dharana, means the sixth step in the yoga, in Ashtanga Yoga, which is dharana. How much can you keep something in your mind, in your intellect? How much can you take in into your intellect? How much can you not even only take in, but how much can you keep it there? And the other definition of dhriti is patience, dhairya. We're going to talk about both perspectives and how I look at both perspectives into these three verses. Starting with the tamasic type of person, a person who cannot live these qualities. We all know that these qualities they take us away from our karma, they take us away from our swabhava as well. They don't allow us to be creative. They don't allow us to interact with our environment in the right way. One is swapna. The first one, which is swapna, you always want to be the sleepy kind of person. You always want to be that person who is sleeping while others are working. Such a person is not going to be able to get the right tools to interact with his environment. Leave alone even being creative, even interacting with a person, he can't do it in the right way. Whenever he wants to interact, what will come out will be anger, because that's also a part of tamasa. He won't be able to leave his sleep. Bhayam, he will always be fearful. He will be fearful because he has never interacted with his environment, and he has never been into rajasa. He's fearful of doing anything. Any karma he does will be like, could I be able to do it? Because I've never done it before. That fear, he can't leave it. When you can't leave your fear, you slowly drift into the tamasa, because you won't be able to do what is supposed to be done. You won't be able to do your right karma. You're always fearful. You won't be able to explore your world. You're fearful. Another perspective is shoka. When you're always depressed, when you're always in the state of mind, somebody just tells you something and you can't take it in, or even just the thoughts that are there in your mind, you can't control them. You can't have them at par with what you want. They move on as they want. You don't even have that much karma in your life that you can control your thoughts. You don't even have that much willpower in your life that you can get out of such depression. Once you've held on to this, you can't unhold them, because you fear, if I unhold them, if I leave them, what will happen to me? How can I live in this world? And you always, like Krishna has already pointed out, is that Virga Sutri kind of person. You're procrastinating. And when you procrastinate a lot, there is that essence of depression that is always there within yourself. You can't leave thoughts. You can't even leave the emotions that you get towards other people. If a person has reacted towards you, maybe at that time he was angry, you can't leave that emotion. You'll say, that person is always reacting in the same way towards me. And then Vishadam and Madam. Can't leave his pride, which is Madam, and he can't leave this serenity that he goes into, not the peace, serenity, but then he goes into this, he drifts into this kind of alasya. He can't even want to think because his thoughts are all clouded. What he knows about thinking is when I think, I get depressed. He doesn't even want to do that now. Such a person is durmedha. He cannot leave all these. Yet, leaving all these is not something that you need to do. They are automatically, you can leave them if you do some karma. Whereas a Rajasic person, he will be prasangena phalakankshi. He will have all these attachments towards the fruits. Such a person's patience, because now look at it from the perspective of patience first. Na vimunchati durmedha, a tamasic person, he has the patience and you'll hold on to all these. Because he has the patience, he can keep on to these things. Whereas another person, he has the patience, but the patience is because he's seeing the fruit in front. The patience of doing the karma is not swabhavik. It's not from the core of his being. It's just because he's seeing that at the peripheral, I will get something. So he can be patient, he can wait. His wait is just because of the fruit, because he can see it. If he doesn't see the fruit, he'll become impatient. Now, Krishna is talking about all these perspectives. We talked about artha, kama, dharma, and moksha at the start of this adhyaya. These four perspectives of how a person can go from artha, just looking at the bodily outside, his possessions, to know his own identity. For example, if I'm a rich person, if I have a lot of possessions, I will say, I am rich. I'm putting richness onto my identity. I have this much money, I have this much property. I'm putting that into my identity. There's another kind of person who is on karma. That person will look for something that is not just on top, not just for the identity. There is something for pleasure. He sees beauty, he sees love, he sees all these emotions, not only at the top. So he'll not run for the money, but he'll run for his emotions. He'll run for his desires, which will be karma. Something more subtle, but yet Krishna is saying, because there will be a future for the fruit, there will be a want for the fruit. That is always going to be Rajasic. Then we talked about dharma, righteousness. We talked about dharma, even leading towards moksha, because it is the step that you take in between the karma and moksha. Dharma is something whereby you are trying to get into the sattvic, because now you want to do everything right. You want to do things right by your own self as well, right by the society. How will you make it right? By getting towards the core of your being. That is dharma. Dharma, in this perspective, is something deeper, something towards your core now. When you're getting towards your core, Krishna is saying, even though it is the fruit of getting towards your core, If you're making it a goal, then you're also Rajasic. However good it may be, you will not get to Sattvic. You'll always miss the point if you're getting towards a goal. When you're always running for a goal, you cannot see the Sattvic, because Sattvic is something that is steady. It's something that is. It's not something that will come. When we're talking about Sattvic, it is there already. Because as we say, Paramatma is there in everyone, is there everywhere. What you need to do to get to your own dharma, what you need to do to get to moksha, is not running for the fruit. It is to stay steady. It is to get what is already there. When you're in Phalakanksha, when you're running for fruit, you can't see what is because you're running. And when you're running normally, like today we even have better ways of running. We have cars, we have planes. So when you're in such a condition, or when you're in a train, you can't see what is at the side clearly. You'll see it just as passing. So even what is just passing for you because you're running towards something. Such patience, Krishna is saying that because he has the patience of waiting for the fruit, but it is still Rajasic. Sattvic, however, Dritya yaya dharayate, mana pranendriya kriya. For us right now, the experience we have is that our mind, our breath, and our senses are the ones which run us. Krishna is saying, not that way, but the other way around. Let your patience run your mind, your breath, and your senses. If that happens, then you get into a state of sattvic. Not only that, your yogena vibhicarinya. You have so much patience. You don't move from one thing to another thing so fast, because a patient person can wait. He can wait to the perspective that if he gets onto one type of yoga, he doesn't go on. Vyabhichari means he goes from one thing to another, and then the second to the third. Because when you go to a sattvic person, he wants to look for that steadiness within, wants to look for that swabhava within. He can wait, just doing one yoga all his life. He can wait for that instance to happen. And in a way, he's not even waiting for the instance to happen, because this is a problem of language now, communication. He can just do the yoga without even the expectation of the fruit. Looking at these three verses from the perspective of patience, we have done that. Now, from the perspective of keeping something in your, like holding on to something, how much can you hold on to something? If you can hold on to the swapna, the bhaya, the shoka, then you can't leave them. And when you've held on to those and you can't leave them, we talked about the buddhi yesterday. Person who has a tamasic kind of buddhi, he is there in tamasa. He doesn't know ayathavat prajanati. He doesn't know what is. He takes the dharma for the adharma and he takes the adharma for dharma. But he is okay there. He doesn't even have any questions about that. In that way, he will stay there. He'll never be able to move up towards the Rajasic. He can't leave his own perspective that he has taken wrongly. And a person who is a Rajasic type of person, he is holding on to the phala, he's holding on to the fruit of the action. He can't leave it. he will do all these. He will hold on to the dharma, artha, and kama as well. Now, the perspective about holding on to, because you're holding on to these, what will happen is you can't leave them when they're supposed to be left. Because you're holding on to these only because there is a fruit in front. Even in the artha, you can't hold on to your profession. You can't hold on to your job if you're not getting the money out of it. You're looking for the money. Or another type of person, he's holding on to his job because he sees the beauty. He sees the music that flows from the job. He sees that from the job. So he's getting that love from the job. So he can't leave it. Also, that person is waiting for something. He wants something out of the job. Krishna is saying none of those. If you can hold on to the moment right now, if you can hold on to the now, then you can flow. Now, this may look like a paradox. If you can hold on to the now, you can flow in the river of the eternal. That's what Krishna wants to say for the sattvic type of person. Because if you're flowing, you're holding on to the now, like you're going moment by moment, you're flowing with the river. In that way, you have yogena vibhicarinya. You don't need to look sideways or any other way. You don't need to flow in the opposite direction of the river. Just flow with the river as it is. And you'll never have to go into another type of yoga. You'll never have to think about anything else. Just you're determined about one thing, and that is it. This is not like the pramada of the tamasic person. He doesn't understand. Tamasic person doesn't understand and is just held on to something that he doesn't understand. A sattvic type of person, having understood everything, now he is getting onto one type of yoga. That one type of yoga, he knows his own swabhava. He knows all the types of yogas that are jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, dhyana yoga, and karma yoga. Now he can hold on to one and not even wait for something to happen. Because even the waiting will show that there is that desire for the fruit. There is a sweet talk that is talked about this, the waiting, whereby now, the waiting goes on to the patience. So there was this time whereby there were two people who were doing tapas under a tree. Now they were under different trees. They were separated by distance. And then one time Narada passed by one of them. One of them was seated under a mango tree, and another was seated under, I'll not get the name right in English, but ambli, if you know, those, they have small leaves, like really teeny leaves, and there's so many leaves. So he was seated under such a tree. Now, as we know, the mango tree has many leaves, but they're big, like you can count them. Whereas the other tree, you can't even count the leaves. Yeah? What happens when Narada passes by this first person who is seated under the mango tree? This person asks Narada that if you're going to the abode of Vishnu, if you're going to the eternal, then I want to ask something. When will I receive the experience? When will I be able to get darshana of Vishnu, of the eternal? That's what he asks Narada. So Narada says, yes, when I come back, I will be able to answer your question because I'll get the answer from Vishnu. Then he goes on to the next person who is seated under the tree of Ambli and that person asks Narada, because they all know Narada as he can always go to and fro from the abode of Vishnu. So he asks Narada now, when will I be able to get darshana of Vishnu? When will I be able to get the experience of the eternal. So they go. Narada now goes to the abode of Vishnu. Coming back, they had the talk and everything. Coming back, Narada came to the first person. First, he came to the person who was seated under the tree under the mango tree, yeah? Telling him that there are these leaves that are on the tree that you're seated under, whichever tree that you're seated under right now, when you're listening to this. That tree, however many years now, you count the leaves and then that many years. After that time, you'll receive the eternal. You'll receive the experience of the eternal. What that person did is just wrap up and go back to his home. He couldn't wait that much. Then moving on to the other person and said the same thing, that when will you receive the eternal, the experience of the eternal? Count the leaves that are on this tree, which are even uncountable, like you can't literally count one by one because they're so small. And when those years elapse, that's when you'll get to the experience of the eternal. What he did was to jump up. Yes, at least the eternal has said that I am a patra, that he can flow onto me. At least there will be some time when he comes. I may not know when, but there will be a time when he comes. So he's not worried about the time. And then Vishnu just came there and then and gave darshana to him. So he experienced the eternal just then. What does this tell us about? Because Narada said that you'll receive the eternal after those many years. But looking at his patience, it's not about that much period. It's about his patience to wait that much period. And I will even like to take it more. If you can wait even for the eternal, then you'll receive the eternal now. But if you cannot even wait a second, then you can't get the eternal now. Now, looking at this from the perspective of both, yeah, the patience and the holding on to what is right, doing the tapas, because that he was ready to do tapas for that many years, on that long, and he wasn't worried about how many janmas it takes, how many births and deaths it takes. At least I've gotten that he will at some time. Now, in that perspective, take both perspectives together now. Patience and dharana, which is determination, holding on to something. When you take both of them together, I will say that there is also another katha that is talked about. There was this guru where the shishya went to him and asked that, what should I keep out of these two? Because I feel that only one of them can be kept. If I keep determination, like if I keep holding on to, I can't have patience, because if I'm holding on to tight, then I should receive it now. Or if I keep the patience, I don't need to hold on to, because I'm just patient, I can just do nothing. Then what the guru said is, come on onto the boat, and we get onto the other side. When the boat reached the middle, what the guru did is leave one of, what do you row with? The boat rows with two paddles. So he left one and started rowing with one only. And the boat started moving in round and round and round in circles. Then even the shishya asked, like, what are you doing? You need both of them, like row both of them so you reach the other side. So he rowed both of them and reached the other side. And then the guru asked, could you reach with one of them, could you reach with one? Say, rowing one of them? No. You'd only move in circles. Then the Guru told him that patience and determination are two things you need together. You need to hold on to, but hold on to with such patience and such reverence, such grace that you can wait such long. In a way that you can do as much activity as is needed, but you can wait for the fruit until eternal. That's when you can get the fruit, which is your Swabhava, right now. And that is what is called as sattva. When you have both of them together, looking into the perspective of tamasic person, he can have the patience, all the patience in the world, but he doesn't have the determination to do anything, can't hold on to anything, any karma, he can't do any karma. Whereas the person of Rajasic, he has all the determination, he can do everything, but he can't wait, he wants everything instant. In a sattvic kind of person, all these two integrate so well. He can do everything with such grace and such patience and with such reverence that he just gets the eternal in this same moment. It's like he gets infinity in this one point. That is what sattvic is.
Wow, Yogeshwar, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. So I'm going to say a few things about it, because I think in the Indian context, the concept of dharana is a huge concept. Dharana is about holding on to something. So firstly, I love the way in which Krishna is explaining the sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. He showed us food. Now he showed us buddhi, that is intellect. Now he's showing us how it applies to dharana. Okay, and dharana is a very large concept in the Indian tradition. Okay, it is a very core concept. It's a question of, what are you holding on to? What are you holding on to? And what you're holding on to is going to really shape you. Okay, so he's asking, what are you holding on to? What are the three kinds of things people can hold on to? Now, it is really interesting. So folks, I don't know this too well, so I'm just going to speak based on my reading of the text and whatever I understand that Yogeshwar has said. Now, let's start with the tamasic. Tamasic, what are they holding on to? They are holding on to, they're full of ignorance. They do not abandon sleep, fear, grief, depression, and also pride. Okay. But in a very deep sense, fear holds on to them. They don't hold on to fear. The sleepiness holds on to them, has a hold on them. They don't hold on to anything. They are kind of anti-effort. Okay, they are being held by fear. They are being held by laziness. They are being held by ignorance. Now, that's a very different mindset. Okay, so there is no initiative. It's a passive reaction to the negative things that are there. Ignorance, fear, anger, grief, and their entire psyche is held by that. In case of Rajasic, what are they holding on to? Again, I love this, what are you holding on to? What they are holding on to is that they are attached to the fruits of the action. Now, they are active. Okay, Rajasic are active, but their attention, what they're holding on to, great attachment to the desires of the fruit, and they hold on to it. So it is something in the periphery. It is something which is the result of action, and that's what they are holding on to. And it's always changing all the time. They're full of action, they're doing all kinds of things, but all of it is like going around in circle, chasing after things which are peripheral. And it's a never-ending cycle going round and round. The movement of a tamasic person is just drifting away from the center into the darkness. Rajasic is going round and round. And they're holding on to things in the periphery and moving towards it. And that's why the movement is circular like that. Let's look at the sattvic person. The unwavering persistence by which through yoga, one controls the mind, the senses, and the life, that persistence, O Partha, is sattvic. So now here I want to bring in the point about the two different meanings of dhriti. So you're holding on. Now, what a sattvic person is holding on to is the center. He's holding on to the center through everything. And that holding on to, the patience is an aspect of that. It's how you hold on to it, that you are focused on it, and there is no hurry. You're just simply focused on it. You don't even experience it as patience. Other people will say, oh, how patient is he? He's sitting there focused on this. But you don't experience it as I think it is just simply love of the center, and you're holding on to that. The other point that is really, really interesting is this concept of eternal now. Okay, this is a very deep concept. What happens is that most of us are focused on things in the periphery, and things in the periphery are changing all the time. The truth, the center, is eternal. And the way to focus on it is the now. So it is like, it seems a very odd thing to say. It is like the eternal now, eternity now is what is being achieved. This is a very deep idea. We saw it in Gospel of John, in Aquinas' commentary on it. Eternal life is simply life now in accordance with the eternal principles. So you are at the eternal now, and you can be there only in the now. Because the moment you start saying, okay, what will I even progress towards the eternal, when you start thinking about it at another point of time, you're looking at aspects of Rajasic thing, because you're getting attached to something else. So this idea of eternal now is a very deep idea. I don't think I'm doing a good job of describing it, but there is something very, very deep here. So thank you very much, Yogeshwar. Just amazing points. So folks, go ahead and ask questions or make comments about what you got. Try to keep focused on just on this material here, this chapter, just anything from this chapter. Let's start with Joe, followed by Evanik. Joe.
I just felt like actually that description of tamasic was really important, actually, because we always look at something as as us holding on to fear as opposed to fear holding on to ourselves. And it has this relationship with inner and outer. Like you first you have to go in order to go out. And that's a very, very deep concept, and something that I really have thought about, but not looked at it from this perspective, from the tamasic perspective. The rajasic perspective of the attachment to the outer, to the periphery, I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong on that, is something where this is where our fears emanate from, in the sense that it's the goal, it's the objective that we're trying to achieve in this process. And the sattvic explanation of just how we're able to be peaceful and part of the center is, that's the most clear to me. That is, but I would like to maybe ask Yogeshwar to go into a little bit of more detail or maybe an explanation. And even though you've gone through this 100 times, I humbly ask that you do it maybe again, is the eternal now. Because I think that is this very, very deep concept. One is the fact that it's accessible to everyone is very important to me in understanding that. And what, maybe if you could just put it into some put some additional words to what Shrikant has already added here this evening, if you don't mind. So
Yes, so the eternal now, what the eternal is and what the now is. If you get any one of those two perspectives, for example, these are two different things, two different perspectives that you get when you reach. It's like a paradox meeting when you reach at the top of the hill. Two different sides that meet. When those two meet, it will feel like as if East and West have met, which normally doesn't happen in the outside world, but in the inside, it truly happens. Whereby one thing that is there in the eternal is all the aspects of the now are there in the eternal. And the now also has the eternal. Talking about the now, what the now has is something that will stay forever. What is that? So if you just do a little bit of practice, look at something in your mind or everywhere that you can look that changes. That can be eternal. So that is not also now. So just allow that to be, go deeper within yourself. What is in there that doesn't change? Is it your intellect that doesn't change? Is it your mind that doesn't change? Are they your emotions that don't change? So go deeper. Yeah. Look at each and every one of them. What changes, what doesn't change? What can be there at one moment and not in another moment? Then, when you go deeper within yourself, you see that there is a drashta, there is a seer who is looking at all these things happening and is there now and has always been there and will always be there. If you can get to that now, he who is there now and is eternal, that eternal now is the drashta who can see all the changes, but is unchanged by any change, can just see everything. He doesn't need to hold on to something. He doesn't need to wait for something to happen. He also doesn't need to pull strings at the peripheral. He can just see things happening. And that is in Sankhya, that is the drashta. If you can get to the drashta bhav, it is the eternal that is there right now, if you can look at it.
Thank you, Yogeshwar. Let me add something. Eternal, I mean, I'm now trying to use Western concepts. Okay, eternal is existence, everything that is. And the now is your experience of consciousness of it. So imagine you saying Om. Okay, you saying Om. And you really say it as you mean it. Means you are focused in the now. Your consciousness is focused in the now through the word Om on the eternal. That is eternal now. You are conscious now. You can only be conscious now. You're conscious through Om. And you're conscious of Brahma through Om. This is the same idea as Trinity. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. The Word is the Om. You, the seer, is the Holy Spirit. The consciousness is the Holy Spirit, which through Word is focused on God. So all of this is sacred. That's why all three are called God. Your consciousness is sacred. Existence is sacred. And the word, the sound through which you grasp it is sacred. That's what it means, that it's all one. And it is this three at the same time. So that's how I understand the eternal now. Joe, does that answer your question?
Very much so. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks. Evanique.
I have, first of all, thank you, Yogeshwar. Thank you, Shurtak, for your words. I mean, that was beautiful, especially about the now. And thank you, Yogeshwar, for explaining Sattvic, Tamasic, and Rajasic. I have a question. Do we, in a sense, transition through all three? Like, I can see myself in all three of those. What do they call them? Sorry.
Gunas.
Gunas. I can see myself through all three gunas. So is it something that we like transition in and out of for each one? Or is it like you're climbing up a ladder? So is it, I guess this is my Western mind. Is it linear or is it kind of like circular?
Yes, so this is how the gunas are organized. All the three gunas are there in each and everything at one time together. Out of those three, you'll have one that is predominant at any one point in time, and the other two will be at the best. They will support that word. What constantly happens in ourselves is all these three have a shift of their own, day in, day out. For example, we have these shifts of, now, the gunas, as Krishna is talking about them, is specifically for certain types of people whereby they have taken on to one guna, concentrated so much on that one guna, and become that. So the other two gunas will be in them, but they will be like so minute. He may have phases of the other two gunas, but it will be like if 24 hours he is in tamas, he may have some small time when he does some rajasic, when he does something. There's no person who can just sleep altogether. You'll have to do some activity and you'll have to get happy at some time. You'll have to have that enjoyment, not the rajasic type of enjoyment, but sattvic, whereby you know that you are. All these three have phases. What Krishna is talking about when he's saying a tamasic kind of person is whereby you don't see the rajasic and tamasic in him if you just look at the person. You only see the tamas in them. In such a kind of person, Krishna is saying such, like he will always hold on to the swapna and the bhaya. However, a normal kind of person, like what we are, we normally are of one type, but all the other two are going to regulate at some times. Like we may be like 60% rajasic, 60% of the time we are rajasic. Then there will be some time, for example, when we have to sleep, when we're tired, or when we're angry, when we're depressed. Those times we know that we're in tamasic. There will be some times when that comes as well. And then there will be a time when there will be this eternal happiness, like if this moment stays, I wish it just stays here where it is, like holding on to that bliss as it is. All these three come, but what Krishna is talking about is because when you talk about a normal person, you can't really point out that this person is either sattvic, rajasic, tamasic, because just normally, all the three gunas are like all there in their own perspective. When can you talk about these three gunas? Is when you look at one side so radically, is when you can see that this person is tamasic, or this person is rajasic, of an extreme kind, or when a person has done so much yoga, has done so much dharana that he's on the sattvic type. What Krishna here is talking about are those radicals. That's when you can know the essence of the gunas. If you talk about a normal person, you cannot know the essence of the guna, because that guna is not really shown in him. It's not flowered in him. So Krishna cannot point out that this person is like this. When you look at the radicals, you can look at what those gunas look like on their own. However, they won't be on their own, they will have that mix, but that mix won't be predominant.
Thank you. Thank you, Yogeshwar. So Evanik, I mean, the way I think about it in a very simple way is using the diagram that I have. There is a center, there is the circular movement, and there is a movement that can go away from the center. So there is a movement towards the center, which is sattvic movement away. And that is not actually explicitly moving away, it is drifting away, with effort, it's like you're drifting away from the center, or you can be attached to things, then you keep going round. So those are the three kinds of things. And the thing is, we have all those three things in us. Those are all potentials of all living things. We need all of them, actually. Like, you need to sleep, you need to eat. So there are reasons why those are there. It's a question of the combinations that you use. And other thing I really like about Gita is how accepting it is of human nature. So this is what human nature is. Now let's see what we can do with it and what we should do with it. So it is moral, but it is based on acceptance of our nature. And then the entire discussion on guna is actually showing us what we are, what are parts of us. and how do you deal with it, and what are the results of doing different things? Thank you. Next up is Elena. Elena, go ahead.
Yes, good evening. My question to you and Yogeshwar is, when there is Dharma is the way that connects the doer and everything that's associated with being here to the ultimate, the God, the energy, the what we call nirvana. It's so Dharma is the way. So when Yogeshwar was saying the river, you are in the middle of the river, and the river will bring you there. Just don't create all this unnecessary, say, energies that bring you into other direction, or don't interfere with what has to be done with the way. So does that mean that Dharma is similar to the middle of the river, or what? Just here we could talk about that.
Okay. So Elena, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to rephrase your question, because you talked about many things about what you think Dharma is, what a river is. Let me just ask Yogeshwar a direct question. Yogeshwar, what is Dharma?
In the context of Dharma itself, what Dharma is that which is the path from the peripheral towards the center. That is Dharma. That is what your own Dharma is. When you're doing that, you may have these different difficulties, you may have these other things that worry you because you're not at the center. You're still at the peripheral and you're moving towards. When you're moving towards, that journey is called Dharma. When you are at the center, that being is called moksha. When you are always moving onto, like when you're moving away from the center, that will be like, it will be called artha, because you're going towards something that is outside. When you're in karma, you are moving in circles. You are moving towards your desires, but you don't know where they lead you to. They don't lead you to the outside, and neither do they lead you to the inside. It's like a gray phase there. You just stay there where you are. Your desires are just there. However, Dharma is something that takes you towards the center. It allows you to be who you are. In there, in the context of what you have done today, in there, Krishna is saying, even Dharma can be Rajasic, in the way that when you're moving towards the center, you have all these wishes, you have all these desires for the fruit, that when the fruit comes, I'll be able to do this. I'll get all these siddhis. Or even on the way, because on the way, there's so many other difficulties that come. When you're only attached to the fruit, there will be all those difficulties that come. You're not at the moment there. You're not there to deal with the difficulties. However, your mind is always on the fruit. When that happens is when Krishna is saying, even Dharma will become Rajasic.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yogeshwar, can we do one thing before we continue? We're going to do 36 through 39 on the happiness. Before you do that, can you do me a favor? Can you recapture or recapitulate how the three gunas apply to buddhi that we just discussed before this? Then we will be able to compare, the buddhi, dharana, and happiness together.
So what buddhi, what the perspective of buddhi is, starting with the tamasic, what tamasic buddhi is when a person knows the opposite to be true. If you have something that you have to do and something you don't have to do, you'll take it for the opposite. You'll say, I don't have to do this and I have to do this. When you have dharma and adharma, you'll take the adharma for dharma and the dharma for the adharma. So you'll take it as opposites. What happens there is that you're so okay with that understanding, with that intellect. You don't even ask any questions. You don't even want to move ahead. You're just okay with what you are. The sattvic on the other side is a person who is okay with the understanding he has, but that understanding is the right understanding. What is dharma, what is supposed to be done is supposed to be done. He knows those distinctions and he knows them for good. That's why he's okay with what he knows. Now, the one in the middle is rajas. A rajasic type of person doesn't know what is right or wrong, but not in the way of the tamasic. He doesn't know the right and the wrong, but then he has these questions in mind. Is this right or is this wrong? That doubt that is there is what Krishna is saying is the rajasic type. And most of us are in this category of the doubt. We don't know, because this thing about buddhi or even dharana, it's not about one concept that is kept, like we'll review that concept when time comes, but it's each and every decision you take. In each and every decision that you take, whether to talk to somebody or not to, whether to ask for something or not to, or when you have two aspects to do, like you can either do one of the two, which one do you choose to do? Everyday life has these three perspectives that we're talking about. And buddhi, which is your intellect, is what you'll use to choose what is right, what is wrong. In everyday life is where your buddhi and your dhriti and even your happiness are compared.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Yogeshwar. Let's see. David, are you ready to read 36 to 39?
Yes,
Go ahead.
certainly. O Arjuna, but now hear from me the three kinds of happiness by the cultivation of which one enjoys and one attains the cessation of all distress. That which in the beginning is like poison and at the end is like nectar. That happiness arising from the serenity of spiritual intelligence of the embodied self is designated in the nature of goodness. That happiness from the combination of the senses and the sense objects, which in the beginning is like the nectar and at the end is like the poison, that is known as the nature of passion. Happiness arising from sleep, sloth, and irresponsibility, which deludes the embodied self in the beginning and at the end is called in the nature of nescience.
Thank you, David. Could you read from the Sri Aurobindo translation? And now the threefold kinds of pleasure, hear from me. That in which one by self-discipline rejoices and which puts an end to pain, which at first is as poison, but in the end is as nectar. That pleasure is said to be sattvic, born of the satisfaction of the higher mind and spirit. Okay, I'm going to read it one more time. And now the threefold kinds of pleasure, hear from me. That in which one by self-discipline rejoices and which puts an end to pain, which at first is as poison, but in the end is as nectar. That pleasure is said to be sattvic, born of the satisfaction of the higher mind and spirit. that which is born from the contact of the senses with their objects, which at first is as nectar, but in the end is like poison, that pleasure accounted as rajasic. That pleasure of which delusion is the beginning and delusion is the consequence, which arises from sleep, indolence, and ignorance, is declared tamasic. Yogeshwar?
Sukham tvidanim trividham shrinu me bharatarshava abhyasadramate yatra dukhantam cha nigacchati yattadagre vishamiva pariname mrutopamam tat sukham satvikam proktam atma buddhi prasadajam vishayendriya sanyogat yattadagre mrutopamam pariname vishamiva tat sukham rajasam smritam yadagre chanubandhe cha sukham mohanamatmanah nidralasya pramadotham tattamasamudaritam. Krishna is now saying, happiness is what I'll explain to you using these three gunas, using these three qualities of Prakriti. Sukha, which is happiness, is the last thing that Krishna is explaining in respect to these three qualities. Why is that so? We normally know that why would we do any activity or why would we refrain from some activity? There will be a reason for everything. When you look for the end reason, you get to know that the end reason why you're doing anything is happiness. Whether it is your short-term happiness or whether it's your long-term happiness, all of them are what you're considering. When you ask someone, why are you getting a good house? Like, why are you building a new house? So that like we can all fit and we can have the space that we need. Why do you need the space that you need? Because we're more in our family. And when you look at the root now, why do you need the space? Because you want happiness now. Why do you need the money? Because you want happiness maybe in the future. Why do you need the right person to live with? Because you want to be happy. Happiness is the end of everything. And then when you ask, like, why do you need happiness? There is no answer. There is an answer to why do you need everything, but there's no answer to why do you need happiness. It is a given. You need happiness for its own sake. That is why Krishna is looking at it that it is the most internal thing you can talk about. Leave alone even talking about intellect. Leave alone even talking about dhriti, patience or determination or dharana. But sukha is why you will even have a certain kind of intellect. Why would you like to drift towards some type of intellect rather than the other? Because you want happiness, whether it's short term or long term. Why would you have the determination to do something for so long? Because I want happiness. Everything that we've talked about, start to the end, equals to happiness. What is that which is beyond happiness? For what we know right now, up to where we have gotten to, there is nothing more than happiness that we're looking for. Why do we need happiness? There's no answer. Because it's just what we want. That's why Krishna is saying that is the most subtle thing you can talk about. Leave it for the end. We can talk about it at the end. That's when you'll understand it. Looking at the tamasic type of happiness now. In chapter 14, we know that what is sattvika? Sattvika means that which is coming out from happiness, knowledge, the true knowledge and true happiness. That is Satvika. Why does Krishna now move on to have three categories of the same happiness? Because you can mistake it. You can think that I am tamasic, still if I have happiness, then I am a sattvic kind of person. You can easily mistake it. Anything that has been put at a higher level is easily misunderstood because we tend to put our words around it and tend to think, yes, I have understood. And then when we put all these words around it and think that we have understood is when we miss the point. That is why Krishna is saying, it may be that you think that happiness is only known at the sattvic type, but what I am really talking about is devoid of the tamasic type of happiness, is devoid of the rajasic type of happiness. What I'm talking about is the sattvic happiness. Starting with the tamasic, it starts and ends with delusion. That is what a tamasic kind of person has. That's the happiness he has, and that's what he's happy with. He's happy with that delusion as it is. Nidra, alasya, pramadotta. It comes out of these three things. We may think, how can happiness come out of sleeping? How can it come out of laziness? How can it come out of delusion? How can it come out of ignorance? It's because a person is just okay with it. It's not the true kind of happiness, the bliss that a person is supposed to get. But because you're just okay with everything that is around, you allow it to be. When somebody tells you to do something, maybe it needs something like reading, or it needs you to do something that is productive. You will say, oh no, I'm tired. I have also this other thing to do, even though you don't have. Even giving that excuse, you see there is a happiness that comes in within you. It's like, yes, I've been able to give an excuse to that person. And the more excuses you give, the more happiness you feel. And we know that in experience, that when we give excuses and we're able to give a good excuse for it, it may not be the right excuse because the excuse doesn't exist, but we feel good about it. When we feel good about it, we are looking for happiness that is of a tamasic type. And the tamasic type of happiness, it starts with ignorance and ends with ignorance. There is no coming out of ignorance there. However, a rajasic type of happiness, what it comes out of is Vishayendriya Sanyoga. When your senses are attached to the object, it comes out of that. All the happiness that you get out of an object that is at the peripheral, that is a rajasic type of happiness. What will it be like at the start? It will be like amrita. It will be like, oh yes, I've attained something that could not be attained by anybody else. However, at the end, there will be that regret that follows that happiness that came at the beginning. Pariname vishamiva. It will catch onto your intellect. It will catch onto yourself that, did I do it right or did I do it wrong? Again, that doubt arises because that is the quality of a rajasic type of buddhi. That kind of happiness that comes out of just the sense object pleasures it will be so pleasureful at first, like you receive all the pleasure at first. And then slowly by slowly, that pleasure will start declining. However, a sattvic type of person, where does it come from? Krishna has put that in verse 36, the end of verse 36. So sattvic has been given 1.5 verses rather than the others, which have been given only 1 verse. Abhyasad ramate yatra dukhantam cha nigaccha. You get it by practice. Abhyasad. When you get something by practice, when you're able to practice it, and through practicing it, you can receive happiness. Most of our habits, they take us down a rabbit hole. And we know that. We know that we are suffering our habits. However, look for some habit, look for something that you can do over and over again. And it gives you the pleasure after the practice rather than just at the start of the practice. Because when you look for the happiness at the start of the practice, you may get the rajasic type of happiness, but then that happiness will slowly decline into sorrow. When you can practice something and get to the happiness of it after the practice, and using that, you get to the end of sorrow. And when you get to the end of sorrow, there is no sorrow that will come again. It's like you're done with sorrow once and for all. It never comes to you again. When you get to that state, you're getting the happiness that is sattva. How will it feel like? At the start, it feels like visham. It feels like a strain. You need to take a leap ahead. You need to make the effort to make the dharana. You need to make the effort to build your intellect. You need to take the effort to do any karma around you. However, what happens at the end? You'll start seeing that amrita. You'll start seeing the happiness, the never-ending happiness. Tat sukham satvikam proktam, atma buddhi prasadajam. What does it do as well? It brings happiness, prasadastu prasannata. It brings that you and all your being. It's like you're covered with grace from some perspective that you've never known. That grace is so intense. That compassion is so intense. It just through you. You don't hold on to it. And that is the quality of the right type of happiness. Something that comes from somewhere you don't know, which is the core of your being, because we're not really knowing what the core of our being is. It's coming from somewhere and it just flows through you. It's like you're the flute and the one who blows into the flute is somebody else. And that tune that comes out is also not you. Something that just flows through you. That air will just flow through you and it will have the right notes that bring bliss even to others around. This is the right type of bliss. This is the right type of happiness. In the Rajasic, we'll see that that type of happiness is only for that person only. It is directed to the self. It's directed that I need this happiness because it is from the sense objects that you're getting happiness. From the Tamasic, it's like you will bring unhappiness to yourself and to the people around by being a Tamasic person. And when you're a Sattvic type of person, you will bring happiness to yourself and you'll also bring happiness to the people around. Because if you see a person in love, you're also affected by that person. You'll also feel lovely. You'll also feel that this person, he is in love, and I also have the potential to be in love. When you see the potential of yourself in another person, then you also get that quality within yourself. Slowly by slowly, you start getting the sattvicness within yourself. That means that you're affecting other people around you by the sattvic that you are. At the start, now this is something that needs to be elaborated, because what we feel that, oh, this sattvic type of nature is all bliss, and that's why we need to get to it. However, at the start, for example, when we start doing any type of yoga, when we start doing dhyana, there will all these thoughts that will start coming out. Even those thoughts that you didn't think that were within you, they will start coming out. Because you're doing some practice, you're going for some type of dharana, you're starting to control it. At first, it will start becoming wild, even more wild than they were before. Because when you do dhyana, your thoughts become more wild than they were before. Having known that, because a sattvic type of person has all the patience and all the dharana that he needs, he can do it to the end and with all the patience. For that reason, he himself doesn't feel that strain when he's doing it. He himself will not see that wildness that is going on. He will be at his own peace. And he also receives that bliss. But it will not come inexpensive. It will come at a cost. That is what Krishna is saying, that Yattadagre Vishamiva. At first it will feel like you need to take a stride. First it will feel like you need a lot of determination, like that determination is eternal. If you have determination only for one day, it's not going to come at all. If you have patience only for 1 month, it is not going to come. You need the patience of eternal and the holding on to the dharana of the eternal. This type of this to shower onto you.
Thank you, Yogeshwar. Thank you. I want to comment on this, and then we'll take questions. So tamasic, again, I know I just love this, the way in which Krishna is doing this. Now we're talking about pleasure or happiness. It's a very difficult thing to be talking about. What happens in case of tamasic? So tamasic, it says, that pleasure of which delusion is the beginning and delusion is the consequence, which arises from sleep, indolence, and ignorance, is declared tamasic. So again, looking at the diagram of center, the circle, the rajasic circle, and then drifting away, which is tamasic. Tamasic is basically turning your back on the center, saying no to the center, and just turning your back to it, and you're just drifting away. So you're just going into this chaos, really, full of ignorance, full of indolence, full of fear, full of grief, and you're just drifting away. In case of Rajasic, it is really our animal nature. It is our focus on immediate pleasure. That's the heart of it. That's the simplest way of understanding it. It is immediate pleasure. And you're seeking that pleasure, and then that pleasure is satisfied. There is an amazing person Jack Panksepp, who has studied mammalian emotions. This is what is the seeking circuit. And seeking circuit is very interesting. Seeking circuit is you see something that you want and you start feeling bad because you don't have it. And then when you get it, you come back to where you were. So it continues endlessly. You're doing things as opposed to the tamasic person who is just kind of just drifting. The tamasic is characterized by anti-effort, no effort. There is effort involved in rajasic pursuit of pleasure, but that is the immediate pleasure. And I love the way in which it is described. That which is born from contact of the senses with the objects, which at first is as nectar, but in the end is like poison, that pleasure is accounted rajasic. So what happens is that you are focused on the immediate gain, but you do not realize that when you keep going round and round like that, you're actually depleting your life and it's not adding up to things. It's like eating sugar. It feels good, but it is doing you harm. You're putting on weight. Your ability to do things is going down, but you do not realize it at once. So that's what is meant. So sugar is a very good way of looking at it, where you're getting something immediately, but you're paying for it over your lifetime. So it is poison in the end. The happiness at the sattvic level is the hardest to understand. And now, okay, that in which one by self-discipline rejoices and which puts an end to pain, which at first is as poison, but in the end is as nectar. Yeah, I really like this. So why is it as poison in the beginning? Because you have to say no to the immediate things that you were used to. You're focusing on the center instead of periphery. All of us will have things in the periphery that we are attached to. So you have to give up that, and that is going to be painful. It is full of effort. It is full of effort because it is about that eternal now. It is intense amount of effort. And in the end is as nectar. That also is very profound. And Dhaneshwar's commentary is just beautiful. Just describes the state of when you are there, because you are full of consciousness and full of this bliss of being in contact with the eternal now and forever, and wanting nothing else other than that. But in order to reach there, anything that is taking you away from it, you have to say no to. And that saying of no is painful. It is born of satisfaction of the higher mind and spirit. So this is you acting according to the deepest part of you, you acting according to your soul focused on the Brahma. The emotional consequence of that is what is being talked about. This is very difficult to explain, to talk about, because it is an experience. And it is an experience that you can have only even when you have you need to have some glimpse of it to see what it is like. And the point is that you will never get there if you don't say no to the treadmill that you are on. You have to kind of say no and do the work of dharana, that is holding on to the center. So would love to hear what everybody has to say about this, or any questions. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark. I want to invite Doug whenever he's ready. Doug, would love to hear what you think of the gunas whenever you're ready. But let's start with Evanik, followed by Joe. Evanik.
I think that last part where you talk about the, sorry, I wrote it down. The Dharma, the journey, and the way you related it to poison, because you don't want to do it and it feels like poison because you're giving up your attachment. But I love that, because that is the only way to get to your center, because if you're still holding on to this thing like over here, and like I'm thinking of the circle now, if you're still holding on to this over here, like you're holding on really hard, you don't want to give up, you bring it back to the center. And when you were talking about sugar, I was thinking of that as an addiction. So you have to really, that's really painful to let go. And people experience withdrawal symptoms, the same thing with caffeine, the same thing with nicotine, the same thing with drugs, right? You experience that pain and that feels like poison, and it's scientific, right? It feels like poison in the body. And it feels like your body's kind of turning against you. That's how painful it is. And you have to go through that in order to get what you want, which is a clear mind, a healthy body, energy. But you have to go through that rough spot first. And a lot of people can't make it past their addiction. And I think of that the same way as attachment. Letting go of the attachment, that's the hardest part. But then I think there's another aspect to it, which is staying detached from that thing that was hurting you, right? Because a lot of people go back when it's not just a physical thing, it's a mental thing as well as a spiritual thing. And that's why it feels so poisonous, because not only do you have to give it up once, you have to give it up. I know alcoholics, and they tell you they have to give it up daily. They have to give up that attachment daily. They have to, same thing with a cigarette smoker. You have to choose every day that you're not going to do that. You're not going to. So that really put it into perspective. So thank you.
Thank you, Evanik. One thing I want to say, again, this is a very difficult thing to talk about. The feel of the Rajasic kind of pleasure is very different than the feel of the Sattvic kind of pleasure. The only way I can describe it is that the Rajasic pleasures are intense and sudden and temporary. The Sattvic pleasures are quieter. They have the quality of serenity and peace, and like it is like comparing it to the foods is a good way of seeing it. Like the Rajasic foods will make your taste buds come alive and you're feeling something right now. Whereas the healthy Sattvic foods is going to give you this sustained feeling of health and well-being across your day. So it's the feel of the feelings, I think, is different. Yogeshwar, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, and also Joe also had a question about this, about happiness and pleasure, how to differentiate them. So one thing that I would like to say about that is, think like music, let's say.
Yogeshwar, let's do one thing.
Sorry?
Your internet is a little bit choppy. Could you stop your video? I think the sound quality will go up.
Sure. So let's think about music for one time. there are different kinds of music, because even music has these three categories that you can put it into. What we are so conversant with is Rajasic type of music, because that beats up, like it gives us the beat, it gives us like something to dance onto. That is the normal music we listen to. Now compare that, when you are into that music, there will be a time when you feel like, oh, I'm tired, and when you've gone all through that, like you're tired of, dancing, and you're tired of that. What happens at the sattvic type of music, it will be so subtle, it will be so quiet. And in that quiet form, you can listen to the music, and it's behind. And when it's not on, not gone away from me, leave its that kind of the
Yogeshwar, you're breaking up.
Sorry.
Yogeshwar, you're breaking up. Let's try. Go ahead again. Let's try it one more time.
Okay. Let's think about another example, like for example, when you're happy in.
All right. I think we've lost him. I think he needs to leave very soon. So let's go ahead and Joe, go ahead. You had something.
Yeah, I was actually, oh, there he is. He's here.
Okay. Still trying to connect.
I hope my internet is okay now.
Let's try it. I know you have only 2-3 minutes, right?
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead and make your point.
Yeah, anyway.
Say goodbye. Go ahead. Okay, all right. That's fine. But we'll
Yeah,
see you
sure.
next time, Yogeshwar. Okay. All right. Joe, go ahead.
Okay. So trying to recapture my question here, or even just my point in general. Overall in the Gita, just kind of looking back, one of the things is that I'm noticing is that all these spiritual journeys that we take, whether it be through karma yoga or sattvic or through the gunas, none of them are really easy. And what I am trying to get my head around is that some of the differences between the two, like what are the differences in the journey? What's the difference between karma yoga and sattvic? Because I start to see some of the similar things where you're kind of getting rid of your ego in karma yoga. And that's kind of similar to what we're talking about here in certain things with like detachment. So I was just wondering if we could go over maybe some of the similarities and the different paths that we can discuss as far as, so we have clarity between the gunas, the yogs, and how they interact with one another. If that's a legitimate, or maybe if it's too off topic, we can come back to it.
Sure. No, that's a great question. So folks, feel free to ask any questions. Now, I have bad news for you. I won't be able to answer any of them, but I'm going to try. But you're feel free to ask any questions.
You could text
Okay,
Yogeshwar.
Was that?
You could text Yogeshwar.
No, I don't want to disturb him. Text is not necessarily the best medium here. But regarding gunas and yogas, they're two different kinds of things. Gunas is simply describing the kinds of faculties, kinds of directions in which we can move. It is at a psychological level. This is part of the Gita psychology. Okay, of saying that these are the three things that you can do You can be lazy and drift away blindly, full of ignorance, full of fear. That's the direction going away from the center, drifting away from the center on autopilot without any effort. Or you can, there is a rajasic direction that is possible to you. You can keep running after anything in the periphery that catches your attention and you get attached to, and you can keep doing that. So that's the going round and round, okay? Or there is a third direction where you ask yourself, what is the truth? Who are you? And focus on that. Those are the three directions in which we are all capable of moving at every point of time, no matter what direction we have taken, what our past is. That is the nature, human nature. That's what guna is about. The 4 yogas are 4 different ways to the center. So they are all, their goal is the goal of the sattvic direction. You're trying to get to the center. And those 4 ways are 4 ways of doing that. Karma Yoga focuses on action as a primary thing. And remember that all those 4 things are 4 ways are connected. If you make progress on one, it'll help you in all the other ones. The way in which Gita approaches it is that just like these 3 things are part of our psychology, there are individual differences that we have. So for some of us, focusing on action is going to be easier than focusing on knowing things. And for some of us, it's going to be easier to have devotion. So we should understand our own swabhava. Swabhava means, swa means your own, bhava means your emotion, your nature, your own nature. So understand your own nature and choose a path which you find most appealing and start work on that. Don't fret, okay, I can't go the Jnana Yoga. Again and again, Krishna tells Arjun, don't worry, if this doesn't work for you, do that. Okay, so in that sense, it is a very, firstly, it tries to understand human nature. It respects the differences. It has a very strong moral message. And it is showing you different paths to it and how they interact with one another. That's the best answer I can give you, Joe. Let's go with Doug. Doug, go ahead. You can say anything that you want.
Yeah. When I first read the Gita, and I just was adding it up, it was about 40 years ago. I think I mentioned this. I directed Shakespeare's most violent play. And as an antidote, when I was leaving town for a break, I grabbed Gandhi's autobiography, and that got me into reading the Gita. I mean, I've probably described this before, but that was, and so I've always approached it a little bit as an actor, and these states of the sattvic, rajasic, tamasic really connected to me as physical states, because an actor really works through the body. And I was also reading a Russian director who was a bit of a mystic, Michael Chekhov, and he talks about moving through space like you're molding space, or that you're flying through space, or that you're floating through space, or that actually you're radiating your energy into the space. And those have odd connections to this. Like, is the matter taking you over and putting you to sleep? Or are you rising above it in aggressive action, which to me, I was thinking it was also a time where I was trying to run a lot. So when you get up and you're supposed to run, you feel definitely like a slug, like you're just dead and you're like in a slough of just, you can't move. Then you start to run more aggressively. And then there's a certain point where you start to run. And I read about Native American traditions of running. And they get to the point where there's that third stage where you feel you're breathing this air, you're running through this air, and your body disappears and you become like the air and you move with the air. So I think some of these three qualities of sattva, the truth, and also I think the more you go into these states, whether the length of your running or the length of meditating, the brain speeds up in really strange ways. And I think that's one of the signs. And I keep having to remind myself because I discover these things and then I do walk away. I forget it. You sort of surrender to the inertia, which is, I think, the tamasic. So I think of those three things are really interesting. And actually, it's one of the reasons I was late. I decided to take a nap and then I couldn't wake up and then I felt almost nauseous. So in a way, I had a real tamasic thing and then I struggled to be more active to just get to the meeting. And then, you know, just hearing these ideas, my energy kind of lightens up. So it's sort of like in the last half hour, I've gone through the three sort of states. So
Wonderful, wonderful.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. No, I think the actor perspective is very powerful. Folks, I would love to hear what any comments on Gita that we have. We've finished the main part today, so we have some time. Love to discuss what you're getting from Gita, any questions, any comments, any thoughts, just anything welcome, because we are about 4 meetups from completing this, our journey in Gita. And so this is a great time to start kind of talking about the wrapping up part. Don't get withdrawal symptoms yet, but just want to give you, but would love to hear what you're getting, what you're finding difficult, any questions.
Let me add one brief thing. I
Yes.
mean, every actor at one point feels like they're walking through mud, and then they feel they're working very hard at it. And then there's another point where you feel like you're free falling into the role. It's like jumping off a cliff and you fall into the role, and there's a lightness to it. So they're very valuable things to ponder in your own actions.
No, absolutely. I mean, the great thing about acting, I think acting is a very powerful perspective because you're putting yourself in all kinds of human positions, and you're moving along all kinds of human dimensions. And you're doing that actually by experiencing that and projecting that. So it's a very powerful way of exploring human psychology and human condition. So wonderful. Thank you. Let's go with Myron. Myron, go ahead.
So I've been really fascinated by, after learning about these three forms of happiness, and they really reminded me a lot of like a lot of online advice I've seen about things like self-improvement, but very vaguely defined fields like self-improvement or skill set acquisition, things like be nice to yourself, be nice to others, or you have to work on certain skills a certain amount of time a day in order to, putting in the effort in order to actually experience that change, that kind of investment, the profit of that investment down the line. I just saw it in much more, I guess, Western psychology terms, like things like, instead of words like sattvic or tamasic, I would see words like security or confidence or motivation. Yeah, so I don't really have like a big point off of that, just that the similarity really occurred to me.
No, absolutely. So I'll say a few things. I mean, one is that I was telling about these 4 paths to a friend who's not religious. She says, wait a minute, this is not religion, this is self-help. This is just showing you what you can do. So I think there is a very deep aspect of it. There is almost, even the way in which Krishna talks to Arjun, it's saying, this is a friend and I'm trying to help this friend. This friend is trying to come to me and I want to help him. And that's the entire mindset of Gita. Secondly, these ideas are very, very deep. These are very deep. And when I try to map it onto modern psychology, what I find is that there is clear tamasic part, and not just Gita. I want to step back. I want to look at Gita, the Bible, and the Tao Te Ching, right? When you look at everything discussed in that as one unit, so keep it aside here. Let's call it the wisdom tradition, okay? And then here you look at the modern psychology tradition. Now, modern psychology is very large and there's a whole bunch of schools in that. So we're looking at kind of patterns at a very large level. Now, things like tamasic things of anti-effort things are very well handled. The rajasic things are very, very well handled. The sattvic things, the amount of focus is not that much. It's relatively less. It is all about like self-help. A lot of the modern psychology is about saying, these are the things you want to do in the external world. How do I do that? How do I do that more effectively? So a large percentage is that. Now there is psychology which is influenced by religion, implicitly or explicitly, which has some elements of it. So the thing that is really unique to the Taoist tradition or the Bible tradition or the Gita tradition is this sattvicness about, that there is a center and that it is good to be focused on it. And what is involved in moving towards it? It is not just a physical movement, it is also a very profound idea in terms of conceptualization. It is saying, bring everything, you're trying to get at the eternal truths. And how do I focus on eternal truths? And each of these traditions has different ways of doing that. And that is very different from the bulk of the focus of modern psychology. So that's what I would say. Next up is, let's go with Ryan, followed by Joe. Folks, would love to hear from you. Any comments, any questions, welcome. Ryan. Ryan, you need to unmute.
Thank you. Something that came to mind while listening about, finding your center and holding on to the center over the peripherals is that it can be difficult to kind of know what that center is. I know we're supposed to follow, righteousness and do the right thing in the moment and just kind of let it flow through you. But I've gotten in scenarios where I'm thinking I'm doing the right thing, or I believe something is right, and I still feel bad afterwards, even though it may have been right for the other party or other person. It almost, the body doesn't align with this duty or righteousness to this center line, and wondering if that's happens, if it's occurred, or if it's talked about in the Gita.
All right, Ryan, that's an excellent question, because the idea of the center is the most profound idea in all these three traditions. I call it the center. The Taoist tradition calls it the Tao. The Bible tradition calls it God or Jesus. The Gita tradition calls it Brahma or Atma. And getting there and making and actually living there is the whole purpose of these entire traditions. So the only thing I would say is that I think immersion into these works slowly trains your mind to get at the center. It is not an easy thing. And most of the times, whatever you get to is going to be not the center. It is going to be your ego, like your impression of what you think the center is, which is usually your ego, and which is very different from the center. Here, to put it in secular terms, you're trying to get at the eternal principles underlying all of life. So looking at, this is how the Greek philosophers would look for it. So, what is virtue? I want to be virtuous. And then there is this entire discussion in Aristotle's, in Stoicism, in Epicureanism. And you have to take in all of that, and you have to be continuously in touch with it. And slowly your ability to get to it, to detect it, to see which one is towards the center and away from the center, keeps building. That's the only way I see. I don't know whether that's a good answer, but that's the only thing I have. Anybody else is welcome to comment on this question, or raise any other questions or comments that you would like. Go ahead and type exclamation mark. If there is, I'm going to give about 10-15 seconds. Otherwise, I'm going to tell you about some amazing meetups that are coming up. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I want to tell you about one meetup I'm thinking of doing and one meetup I am doing, both on Sundays. So the meetup that is already set is meetup by Yasuhiko Kimura. And don't miss that. That's going to be incredible meetup. It's going to be at 11 a.m. Eastern time on Sunday, on this Sunday. The topic is the psychology and cosmology of the Übermensch. By Übermensch, he doesn't mean Nietzsche's idea of Übermensch. He simply means human beings at their best. What is the psychology of us at our best? And what is the cosmology? By cosmology, he means philosophy. He means what is the view of nature? What is the view of mind? So what is the philosophy and psychology of human beings at their best? That is the subject. And Yasuhiko is a good friend. He is an amazing person. He became a Zen Buddhist monk at the age of 16, spent 3 years studying Indian scriptures in India. He is completely conversant with all of the Western conversation. And he is he's a very deep philosopher in his own right. So he will have completely new things to say about it. And so don't miss that. That's going to be at 11 o'clock. Now, folks, I have been working on several things. The topic that I'm working on right now, and I think we'll continue to work on for some time now, is language. And I want to do a meetup on language at 9 p.m. on Sunday. I want to understand, so I want to get started now. I want to just raise the topics and questions now. And I want it to be a discussion. I don't want to talk too much about what I think, because I'm in the process of bringing things, I'm working on so many things about it. We looked at Owen Barfield and saw what language can do. We went through Silver Trumpet and see the effect of language. We've seen beautiful language in Gita. Unfortunately, it's Sanskrit, so don't understand it directly. We saw the beauty of the language of Tao Te Ching. We saw the beauty in Gospel of John. we're experiencing the beauty in the poems. Owen Barfield puts it beautifully. He says that language at its best can produce a felt change in consciousness. To compress it further, language can change your consciousness. It can dramatically change your awareness of the world itself. And that is what language can do. I mean, take, Gospel of John. I can read it anytime. Just the beginning. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. And the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him. Without him, nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Now, every time I read this, new things happen in my mind, in my consciousness. I'm conscious of new things. This is true of anything good. So let me read. I don't watch movies, but I'm going to make an exception here, and I'm going to read a quote from a movie. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. This is what language can do at its best. What kind of a thing is this? I want to have a discussion on language and what it can do. So bring your questions. We've done several meetups on language, but it was a while ago. I think I've done 5 meetups on language. But I don't know whether they're good now. I thought I think they're very good, but I'm not sure. But I want to have a discussion. I want to have people talk about language. So tell me, if you're excited about, if you would like to, regardless of whether you can make it this Sunday or not, because my general approach is that I will probably keep doing meetups on language. So just give me some high-level things about your interest in this topic. Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to share. Joe, what do you think?
I'm excited because I agree wholeheartedly that it expands our consciousness and our understanding of the world, how we use words, and if we can get to the essence of what what we're saying, and it's critical to how we express ourselves to others, how we communicate with others. I think that this is perhaps one of the more this is a topic that you can't go over too many times.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. Fully agree. Evanik followed by Dave. Evanik.
I'm very interested. I don't think I've ever attended any of the language ones besides Owen Barfield, and that was the Silver Trumpet.
Yeah, so, because those meetups were done way back. It was like a year or 2 back.
Okay.
But I'll put up. Joe, can you do me a favor? Can you go ahead and search for the
If I can
playlist.
find them, yeah, because
No,
that was
No,
102.
no, just go to the playlist, and there is a playlist for language.
Oh, good. All
Just
right, I'll do that.
Yeah, I think
Go
Joe
ahead.
was saying 3 years ago. I think he was holding up 3 fingers. So, I wasn't a part of 52 Living Ideas back then. So, it'll be very interesting. I'm very interested in the topic.
Okay, let me just preface. I'm being, I don't know. I mean, I think those meetups should be very good, because what they are is that at least 2 of the meetups are based on the concept of language in 52 Living Ideas. So they are going to talk about everything all the thinkers have said about language. Okay, I mean, that is really, really very interesting stuff. So that's a good place to start. But I find that this topic is so deep that even that, I don't think, I mean, that's a good starting point. But go ahead, Ebony. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I was just saying, since, I haven't seen them, I think it'll be an interesting meetup. I'm curious. I'm going to just
Go
say
ahead.
that. I'm curious.
Okay, very good. Dave, followed by Myron. Dave.
Yeah, my friend Shikant, I've been thinking about language. It's fascinating, but the origins of people first starting with symbols, the Egyptian hieroglyphics and Asian symbols, China and Japan, that communicating with symbols that have a meaning, a phrase, emotion, whatever, as opposed to a letter that has a sound. And of course, then, in the Romantic languages that from Europe that I'm familiar with, of course, that we have basic grammar and letters and things that are interesting. But I think getting to what my friend Joe was talking about, we communicate with stories. We use language to influence each other, to convince each other of things. As a musician, I can speak of music as a language. To me, it's a fascinating, huge topic to get into. And I think we can have some very interesting discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Next up is Myron. Myron, what do you think?
Yeah, just piggybacking off of Dave, actually, I've always been really fascinated by the evolution of languages. So there are plenty of YouTube videos that show how like English evolved from Old English to modern English, how Greek evolved from like the ancient Attic to modern Greek, or at least how different they are, how Old Chinese evolved into modern Chinese, and how Latin evolved into like French and Spanish.
Absolutely. I mean, there is really, I mean, the number of topics here, the depth, the richness is as large as human experience, because language is simply the means through which human beings have done everything, and it's indispensable means. So it dovetails like all of human progress and human civilizations. So it's a very essentialized way of looking at the human adventure. So when the language evolves, it is the evolution. There's a co-evolution of language and culture. And you have to get the entire context in order to fully appreciate the evolution of language. You have to get an appreciation of the evolution of the history of those people who are using the language, because it is through use of the language that they are shaping the civilization. So there is this back and forth relationship. The civilization enriches the language shapes the civilization. It is Marshall McLuhan's term that we shape our tools and the tools shape us. Nowhere it is more truer than language. So I hope to see you there. It's going to be, I'm not announced it yet. We'll be announcing it shortly. It's going to be on this Sunday at 9 p.m. So think of the things that you would like to bring up. I'm more interested in questions. It's going to be just a kickoff for how we are going to approach language. So bring your questions, spend time thinking about what you would like to bring up about language. Keep aside your theories, because nobody really understands. I don't think anybody understands language. Like it's actually enormously complex, because it's the same as understanding human beings, and we don't understand human beings too well. And so, but the biggest thing we can do is to put our questions down and start working on it. All right, Mike, go ahead.
I don't know if I wasn't paying too close attention to it, I admit. But did you bring out Julian James's contribution to the
Please.
subject?
Please, I have not done that, but please go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, language was created because people stopped living in hunter-gatherer groups, and they had to communicate on at wider levels. The problem with languages that are used right now by countries is they're multi-valued, they're ambiguous, and when we talk to computers, they've evolved languages that are less ambiguous, but they're still ambiguous. When multiprocessors talk to each other, there's been evolved a kind of a object-oriented notation that's self-defining and unambiguous. And that theory of what language is really evolving, and there's a lot of technology in it right now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. I do think that the ambiguity is a feature, not a bug of language. We should look at, it's a very large topic. Okay, it's just a very, very large topic. Language keeps evolving. I really thank Mike to bring up Julian Jaynes, because he's the deepest thinker I know on this topic.
You might want to invite him to listen to this. Let him know that give him a heads up that this is happening.
I will do that. Unfortunately, he's dead, so I don't think he will come.
There were several other people that were colleagues of his. I didn't realize. When did that happen?
That was about I think 91, I want to say. So yeah,
who was the guy that was that presented?
Yes, I know. Yeah. So what I found is that my track record, I've tried to invite people. My track record generally is very good. I can get about 75% hit rate, but for dead people, it's been
it's much harder. But that's what the Hindu reincarnation thing may have application.
All right. Okay. Thank you. I know, Mike, it is not, it's, we had, so let's keep it aside. The core idea of Julian Jaynes is very, very deep. What he's saying is that the conceptual consciousness, the consciousness as we understand it, is created by use of language. Okay, so it's a very huge idea, very deep idea. Owen Barfield is also saying exactly the same thing, that progress of language and progress of consciousness go together. Okay, it is a profound idea. It is the idea of the silver trumpet. The word, it is the idea of Om. It is the idea of, in the beginning, there was the word. If you look at in the beginning, there was the word from the Jainesian perspective. This is describing the birth of consciousness with language. And then it is actually true. So what I'm saying is that it's very, very deep topics that we are talking about here. But I want to bring up any questions. So please bring questions. Let's go with Doug. Doug, go ahead. What do you think of language? I really want to know. You need to unmute.
Yeah, I got on mute. Well, I just wanted to throw out one idea because, actors work with language and playwrights and that, but it's, in a way, there's something deeper under the language that I think is the root of theater. And I was doing some research, well, for my whole life about language and how actors use it. And I ran across an odd piece of research in the Wilson Quarterly that suggested language wasn't a late development in evolutionary terms, but that it grew out of music. And there's a study of gelada monkeys that have a call response kind of music that they sing to each other to communicate. And the theory is that maybe language developed out of this call response. And the thing that the singing of the monkeys does is if one of them goes quiet and is not singing, then maybe something's wrong with them. And it's sort of a signal that the group is okay. And that out of that, so you can imagine, and I developed an exercise for actors out of that. And then I realized there was a major, really excellent acting teacher in New York who sort of did that and took it further, where he had actors echo words to each other and then phrases and then a simple sentence. It was just like, I don't believe you. Well, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. And they just are chanting back and forth. So that idea that somebody maybe picked something up and made a sound and then somebody else imitated that sound and they decided that's the sound for an apple. I mean, this idea that it came out of music is very interesting to me and worth maybe exploring that a little bit.
I mean, the best I know about this topic is that there are two kinds of languages and they have completely different functions.
At least two.
At least two very fundamentally different things. One is a conceptual language and one is a more perceptual social language. So for example, music just reaches your emotions directly, and language is musical and you can use it like that. Like much of small talk, much of what goes on between a child and the mother, there is a lot of that. And that language and that use of language is very, very old. It's definitely primate, part of it. Our primate brain responds to it, the way in which, we do have a much more advanced larynx and vocal producing mechanism. So the range of what we can do, the sounds is larger than other primates. But it is in the same continuum as you were saying. But that entire progression is different. There is another kind of language which is responsible for creating cities and building large monuments, having kingdoms, inventing religions. That there is a break, and that's where Julian Jaynes comes in. That there is, and it really takes off with the advent of writing, because what writing does is that it moves from a purely auditory to a written form. And once you write things down, it is not this flowing thing. Like, the way in which the actors are practicing it, it is actually maximizing the flow of sounds, of meaning, of actually, it's not just language, it is body language, which is very deeply connected with the sounds that are being produced and the interaction, the way in which these groups are interacting with one another. It is like a whole multimodal kind of interaction. Now, fast forward to writing. Writing is something very, very different. The cuneiforms in Sumeria are used to keep track of how much granary, how many bushels of wheat somebody got in, so that when a year from now, when it comes time to give out granary, that will be used. Now, that is a very different kind of a thing. It's a conceptual thing. It is the thing that builds cities. Or words like that we've been studying in Bhagavad Gita of the center of Atma, or those things are very different kinds of things. So there is a big break, and that happens around something like, I think, 1800 BC, somewhere 800 BC, somewhere around that range, where you go from, it's several things happen at the same time, maybe a little bit earlier. It is growth of cities, growth of writing, agriculture, all of it coming together. It is a way for people in a larger groups to work together, even though they are not part of the same family or tribe. So it's moving from this tribal community of 30 people and 150 people around them to cities of 4,000, 5,000, where you do not know people. So and it's the language, which is a crucial tool to do that. So that is the language that kind of goes forward. The other language is carried with it. We have, our more primitive nature, evolutionary nature, we still carry with us. So the musicality is there in Shakespeare. It is laid on the top, it underlies everything else. But Shakespeare is doing more, Goethe is doing more than what other people could do. So that's what I would say. But great point. Thank you. All right. Anybody else? All right. So folks, we'll see you soon. And this is very, very exciting. Let's see what we can do. Bring your questions on language on Sunday. See ya. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Good night.